At 8:59 on ranking day, the university's main screen showed my name in first place. At 9 exactly, every number vanished. Not just mine. All 212 results dissolved into a white page while the entire cohort stood beneath it, holding phones above their heads, ready to photograph the moment their futures became official. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else shouted that the system had crashed. Then the dean stepped onto the marble landing with a face so pale I knew the crash had a pulse. Beside her stood our private assessment tutor, Miss Celeste Ward, dressed in cream as if she had come to a wedding rather than the funeral of her own career. Her eyes found mine through the crowd. For one sharp second, the confidence drained from them. She knew. I knew. And, because I had already lived this morning once before, I understood exactly what was about to happen. In my first life, the rankings had appeared without interruption. Celeste's favorite students had risen like miracles. My score had dropped 17 points overnight, pushing me from 1st to 19th and costing me the Halden Fellowship, the placement at St. Arlen's Clinical Institute, and the only scholarship that could have kept my younger sister and me in the city. When I questioned the change, Celeste accused me of manipulating preliminary results. She produced altered screenshots, selected fragments of our messages, and a formal complaint carrying my digital signature. I was suspended before lunch. By sunset, the student forums had named me a fraud. 3 weeks later, while crossing the rain-slick bridge after another failed appeal, I saw my own face on a bus shelter under the headline "Academic Cheating Scandal Deepens." I stepped backward, without looking. There was a horn, white light, and the sensation of the world closing like a slammed book. Then I woke 6 weeks earlier in my narrow dorm room, with Celeste's first message glowing on my phone: "Delete our chat after reading." The assessment board audits everything. In my first life, I obeyed. In this one, I took a screenshot, exported the conversation, copied it to 2 encrypted drives, forwarded it to an email account no one knew I had, and whispered into the dark, "Let's see who disappears this time." Celeste's method began with favors small enough to seem harmless. At our next tutoring session, she asked me to stay behind after the others left. The room smelled of dry markers and orange peel. She locked the door, lowered the blinds, and placed a folder between us. "You're currently projected first," she said. "But projection is not protection." Inside the folder were practice cases not yet released to the cohort. In my first life, I panicked and refused to look. Celeste praised my integrity, then later claimed the folder had been mine. This time I did something different. I kept my hands in my lap and asked, "Are these official materials?" Her smile flickered. "They're developmental drafts." "Am I allowed to have them?" "You're allowed to benefit from my mentorship." The answer was elegant and useless. I glanced toward the ceiling camera. Celeste followed my eyes and laughed. "That one hasn't worked in years." I remembered that line too. In my first life, it reassured me. In this life, it gave me a direction. I told her I felt uncomfortable taking physical copies and asked whether she could send me the questions through the university portal. She refused immediately. Too visible. Then she pulled out her phone. "I'll send you a summary privately. Delete it after." I nodded, performing the uncertain gratitude she expected. My phone buzzed. The message included 3 exact case themes from the upcoming assessment and a note: "Focus on these. Trust me." I thanked her, left the room, and walked directly to the library's digital forensics lab, where my friend Sarah worked evenings. Sarah was a cybersecurity student with silver-rimmed glasses and the emotional warmth of a locked server, but in my first life, she had been the only person who believed my screenshots were real. She believed me too late, because I had deleted the originals. When I entered the lab, she looked up from a dismantled keyboard and said, "You look like you've seen your own autopsy." Something close. I showed her the message. She read it twice. "This is either reckless favoritism or bait." Both. I asked whether she could help me preserve messages with metadata, timestamps, device logs, and verifiable hashes. Sarah leaned back. "That is a very specific request. I need evidence that survives someone saying I edited it." She studied me for a long moment. I could not tell her I had died. I could tell her the truth that mattered. "Someone is going to frame me." She did not laugh. She turned her monitor toward me and said, "Then we don't save screenshots. We save a chain of custody." The first pattern break came on a Wednesday at 2:07 p.m. when Celeste sent a message that did not belong to me. It appeared, vanished, then reappeared as message deleted. The preview had already shown enough. Dahlia's score must clear Alara's by at least 4. Her father expects confirmation before the gala. I was sitting in pharmacology when it arrived. The lecturer was explaining receptor affinity, but all I heard was the rush of blood in my ears. Dahlia Voss was second in our cohort, wealthy, polished, and permanently surrounded by the faint perfume of expensive certainty. In my first life, she had risen to first after my score collapsed. She accepted the Halden Fellowship while reporters photographed Celeste adjusting the collar of her gown. I had hated Dahlia for months before I died. Reborn, I wanted to hate her again because hatred was easier than investigation. Yet the message suggested she might be part of the bargain rather than its architect. At lunch, I watched her across the courtyard. She sat alone, stabbing a salad without eating. When Celeste approached, Dahlia's shoulders tightened. Celeste leaned close and said something that made the color leave Dahlia's face. That was not the body language of a willing conspirator. It was the body language of someone being managed. So, I changed the plan. Instead of avoiding Dahlia, I took my tray and sat opposite her. She looked up sharply. "Did you lose a bet?" "No. Then why are you here?" In our cohort, rivalry was treated like weather. Everyone expected us to dislike each other because we occupied the top 2 positions. Celeste encouraged it constantly, praising one of us in front of the other, passing along carefully edited comments, creating tiny wounds, and calling them motivation. I said, "Celeste told me you think my mock scores are inflated." Dahlia's fork stopped. "She told me you said my father bought my place." There it was. Not proof, but a seam. I asked, "Did you say it?" "No, neither did I." For several seconds, the courtyard noise seemed to move farther away. Dahlia stared at me, calculating. Then she whispered, "She has screenshots." "So, does she when she frames people?" Dahlia's eyes snapped to mine. I did not show her the deleted message. Not yet. Trust built too quickly could be another trap. I only said, "Start saving everything she sends you." Dahlia gave a brittle laugh. "You sound paranoid." "I'm trying very hard to stay that way." I stood to leave. Before I took 2 steps, she said, "She told me to delete our messages." I looked back. Dahlia's expression had changed. The rivalry was still there, but underneath it was recognition. "Mine too," I said. Celeste sensed distance before it became resistance. The next evening, she invited me to her office and offered tea from a porcelain pot painted with blue birds. I remembered that tea from my first life. She had served it before asking me to sign a document confirming tutoring hours. That document later became evidence that I had requested restricted materials. This time, when she slid the form across the desk, I read every line. The top page appeared harmless, but beneath it sat a carbon copy with different text aligned under the signature box. My skin prickled. The lower page stated that I had accessed confidential assessment drafts and understood that unauthorized possession could lead to dismissal. It was crude, almost insulting, yet effective if signed quickly. Celeste smiled. "You don't usually take this long. I've started reading things. That can become a bad habit in institutions." I lifted the pages together. Why is the copy different? Silence. A clock clicked twice. Then Celeste's expression softened into disappointment, as if I had failed a moral test. "It's an administrative template. You're overthinking." "Then I won't sign." She poured tea, without looking at me. "Alara, talent is not rare. Compliance is. The students who succeed understand when to stop asking questions." In my first life, that sentence haunted me after my suspension. Now I let it settle between us and said, "Are you threatening my ranking?" Her spoon struck the cup. Tiny sound. Huge mistake. "Of course not." "Good. Because rankings should reflect assessed performance." "Should," she repeated and smiled. I left the document and signed. 10 minutes later, she sent me an audio message. Her tone was affectionate, almost maternal. You seem distressed tonight. I worry that pressure is affecting your judgment. I've protected you more than you realize. Please don't force me to document concerns about your stability. Delete this after listening. I stood beneath the administration building's stone arch while rain threaded the courtyard. My first instinct was fear. The second was fury. The third was strategy. I forwarded nothing. The automatic archive captured it. Then I typed a calm reply. Thank you for checking in. To avoid misunderstandings, please communicate any academic concerns through my official university email. She did not respond for 3 hours. When she finally did, it was one word. Fine. That one word frightened me more than the threat because it meant the performance had ended. Celeste no longer saw me as a student to recruit. She saw me as a problem to remove. I expected her next move to target my grades. Instead, she targeted my friendships. Livia returned to our dorm one night with red eyes and a folded misconduct notice. Someone had reported that she used unauthorized notes during a mock assessment. The report cited an anonymous student witness and included a photograph of a formula card beneath her chair. Livia swore it was not hers. I believed her immediately because I remembered the first life. She had been cleared then, but the investigation consumed 2 weeks and shattered her concentration before finals. I had treated it as bad luck. Now I saw timing. Celeste wanted me isolated and guilty. She knew Livia, and I studied together. If Livia were accused, my materials could be searched, our messages examined, and suspicion transferred. Worse, she knew I would focus on saving my roommate instead of protecting the evidence. Who would report me? Livia whispered. Someone who needs us looking sideways. I asked to see the photo. The formula card contained an error Livia never made. It listed sensitivity as true negatives divided by all negatives. Livia taught that concept to half our floor. But another detail mattered more. The corner of the card bore a faint purple stamp from Celeste's private tutoring packets. I had seen it on the developmental drafts in her office. I photographed the notice and told Livia not to confront anyone. That sounds like the advice guilty people give. It's also the advice alive people give.
She stared.
I corrected myself. People who want to stay enrolled. The next morning, I accompanied her to Student Integrity Services. I said little, but I asked whether the original card had been secured. It had not. Only the photograph existed. Convenient. I asked for the image metadata. The officer frowned and said students did not usually request that. Students usually aren't accused with digital evidence, I replied. Sarah later inspected the copy legally provided to Livia and found that the photo had been taken 40 minutes before the mock assessment began. The chair in the image was not even in the assigned room. The flooring pattern belonged to Celeste's tutoring suite. It should have ended the accusation immediately, but the university moved slowly, and Celeste relied on slowness. So I created speed. I sent a concise, factual email to the integrity office, copying the assessment director, requesting preservation of access logs, room bookings, camera footage, and the original report submission data.
No accusations.
No drama. Just preservation. By afternoon, Celeste messaged me. You are making routine matters unnecessarily public. Delete your preservation request before it causes reputational harm. I looked at the screen and smiled for the first time in days. She had just connected herself to a complaint she was not officially supposed to know about. Dahlia joined us the following Saturday, though she pretended she had not. Sarah and I were in the back corner of a 24-hour cafe, reviewing Celeste's spreadsheet, when Dahlia placed a flash drive beside my cup and sat down without invitation. I was never here, she said. Sarah examined the drive, but did not touch it. What's on it? Messages. Payment requests. Instructions. Dahlia's voice was steady, but her hands were not. She told us Celeste had approached her family the previous year after Dahlia's father funded a simulation laboratory. Celeste offered strategic mentoring and guaranteed that Dahlia's performance would receive appropriate institutional recognition. Dahlia assumed it meant networking and additional tutoring. Then Celeste began sending assessment themes, asking for donations to a private education foundation, and demanding introductions to other wealthy parents. When Dahlia tried to withdraw, Celeste threatened to release edited messages suggesting Dahlia had purchased exam access. "So you kept going?" I said. Dahlia looked at me with open hostility. "What would you have done?" The old version of me would have answered self-righteously. The reborn version remembered deleting messages because a respected tutor told me to. Probably something I'd regret. Her expression loosened by 1 degree. Sarah inserted the drive into an isolated machine. The files included bank transfers from the Voss Family Foundation to an organization called Meridian Academic Outreach. Celeste was listed as an unpaid advisor, but metadata and attached invoices showed she created them. More importantly, Dahlia had saved a voice note from 3 months earlier. Celeste said, "Your father is not paying for marks. He is supporting the ecosystem that allows me to ensure the correct candidates are visible. If Alara remains ahead, I will manage it during moderation." Dahlia had replied, "Don't touch her score." Celeste answered, "Then improve yours by 17 points in 6 weeks. Silence followed. Listening to it felt like hearing my first life crack open. Dahlia had not ordered my destruction. She had objected, weakly and privately, then protected herself. That did not make her innocent. It made her human. "Why bring this now?" I asked. She looked toward the rain on the windows. "Because she told my father the final transfer is due before rankings. When he refused, she said I'd fall below 20th. She used the same number on me?" I said. 19th. Dahlia laughed once, without humor. "Efficient." We agreed on nothing emotional. No promises of friendship, no dramatic handshakes. We agreed on procedure. Dahlia would continue responding normally. Sarah would preserve her evidence separately. I would not reveal what I knew. And none of us would take the case to Celeste's allies on the ranking committee. We needed someone outside the circle, someone with authority to freeze results before publication. The problem was identifying who had not already been bought, flattered, frightened, or compromised. The answer came from Nico, a student Celeste had privately called statistically expendable. I found him at 4 in the morning in the bakery where he worked, flour on his sleeves and exhaustion carved beneath his eyes. He looked alarmed when I entered, as though top-ranked students did not exist before sunrise. I bought a loaf I did not need and asked whether Celeste had ever offered him private tutoring. His face closed. "I can't afford her." That wasn't my question. He glanced toward the kitchen, then said she had offered a reduced fee package after his mother was hospitalized. He accepted. During sessions, Celeste asked about his financial aid, immigration status, and work schedule. A week later, she told him his fatigue made him academically unreliable and suggested he voluntarily defer. When he refused, strange things began happening. His submitted assignments appeared late. His practice scores changed. A complaint alleged that he smelled of alcohol during a lab, though he never drank. "Why didn't you report her?" I asked. Nico gave me a tired smile. "To whom?" "Her former student runs support services. Her husband's firm sponsors the appeals clinic. Her photo is in the dean's annual report." Then he said something I had forgotten from my first life. There was one examiner she hated. Professor Amara Quill, chair of External Assessment Review. She had challenged Celeste's moderation model 2 years earlier, arguing that tutor recommendations should not influence ranking adjustments. Soon afterward, Quill was removed from internal meetings and assigned to audit overseas placements. Celeste called her unstable. The institution called it restructuring. But Quill remained an accredited external examiner and had statutory authority to request preservation of assessment records if credible evidence suggested systematic interference. I found her name on an old university policy page and searched the official directory. She was due back in the city the week before finals. Timing mattered. If we approached too early, Celeste could bury the issue, discredit us, or accelerate the frame-up. If we waited until rankings appeared, the damage would already be distributed across scholarships and placements. We needed to trigger an external freeze after final marks were submitted, but before moderated rankings were released. A narrow window. 6 hours. According to the calendar Sarah uncovered in a committee attachment, Celeste accidentally sent Dahlia. Nico watched me absorb this. "You're planning something." I'm planning to make everyone's real score survive moderation. He shook his head. People like her don't lose, because someone proves they lied. They lose when the institution decides keeping them is more expensive than exposing them. The sentence stayed with me. Evidence alone was not enough. We had to make concealment impossible. Celeste escalated 2 weeks before finals. At 11:38 p.m., she sent me a file labeled Personal Performance Review. I did not open it on my phone. Sarah examined it in the lab and found a macro designed to create local files that mimicked copied assessment materials. It was not sophisticated malware, but it was sufficient to plant incriminating documents in my downloads folder if opened with default settings. My stomach turned. In my first life, I had opened that file. During the investigation, officials found restricted case summaries on my laptop. I insisted I had never downloaded them. No one believed me because the access log showed my account and the files existed on my device. Now I knew how she had done it. Sarah documented the file, preserved the headers, and opened it only in a sandboxed environment while recording the process. The macro generated 3 documents with creation dates backdated to the previous month. One contained my student number. Another included tracked changes under my username. The third was a draft confession stating I had pressured Celeste for insider help. Sarah stared at the screen. This crosses from misconduct into criminal territory. Can we prove she sent it?
Yes.
Can we prove she made it? Maybe. The metadata points to a device registered as CW Tutor 03, but device names can be spoofed. A minute later, Celeste messaged, "Review before morning. Delete after reading." I typed, "The file won't open. Can you resend through official email?" She replied immediately, "No. Use a university computer." That instruction was the trap's second jaw. If I opened it on campus, the planted files would appear on university hardware under my login, creating stronger evidence. I wrote, "I'm uncomfortable with unofficial attachments." Her response arrived as an audio note, sharp and breathless. "Stop performing innocence, Alara. You accepted help. You benefited. If you suddenly become righteous, you will only make yourself look guilty." She deleted it 30 seconds later, but our archive already had it. I listened twice. In the background, a printer beeped, then a man's voice said, "The adjustment sheet is ready." Celeste hissed, "Not now." The audio cut off. We isolated the sound and enhanced nothing. Enhancement could be challenged. We only noted it. Adjustment sheet. Final rankings were not yet calculated, yet a sheet already existed. That meant Celeste's manipulation occurred before the official moderation meeting. Somewhere, there was a parallel ranking prepared in advance. Find that, and we could demonstrate intent before any score changed. We did not hack anything. Sarah repeated that rule until it became our prayer. We only use files sent to you, records you are entitled to, and information voluntarily provided by witnesses. So we searched legally. Dahlia reviewed every attachment Celeste had ever sent her. Nico requested copies of his own academic records. Livia submitted a data access request related to the false misconduct allegation. I combed through official committee documents available to student representatives. The breakthrough came from a banal mistake. Celeste emailed Dahlia an invoice as a PDF, then recalled it. Dahlia's mail client retained the original attachment. Hidden in the PDF package was an embedded spreadsheet named final_visibility_model_V7. It looked like an administrative budget table, but when Sarah opened a copy safely, we found linked cells referencing anonymized student IDs and projected ranking movements. The names were hidden, but the student numbers were not fully masked. Mine ended in 4187. Dahlia's ended in 0302. Nico's ended in 7714. The model assigned each student a visibility coefficient, a donor confidence index, and a narrative risk. Raw academic marks occupied one column. Recommended ranking occupied another. My raw total placed me first. My recommended total placed me 19th. Dahlia's raw total placed her third. Recommended, first. Nico's raw total placed him 46th. Recommended, 118. Livia's raw total placed her 32nd. Recommended, 74th. The spreadsheet also contained comments. Beside my row, resistant, convert or discredit. Beside Dahlia's, high-value family, maintain top placement. Beside Nico's, low retention probability, score reduction defensible. I had imagined revenge as heat, a blazing thing. The spreadsheet made it cold. Numbers had been assigned to our usefulness. Our futures were edited in cells. We printed nothing, but Sarah generated cryptographic hashes and documented the file path, the email source, and the embedded structure. Dahlia looked sick. My father's donation is in the coefficient. Nico stared at his recommended rank. 118 would cancel my placement eligibility. Livia whispered. She built my accusation into the model. I scrolled to the workbook properties. The author field showed Celeste Ward. The last modified by field showed Martin Vale, Deputy Director of Rankings. Celeste was not alone. I should have felt defeated. Instead, I felt clarity. One corrupt tutor could be dismissed quietly. A deputy director using a covert ranking model could not. The institution's cost of concealment had just multiplied. We contacted Professor Quill through her official examiner address using a message, Sarah, and I rewrote 7 times. It contained no dramatic accusations, only a summary of concerns, the categories of preserved evidence, and a request for a confidential meeting under the External Assessment Integrity Protocol. We did not attach the most sensitive files. We attached hashes, selected metadata, and one unambiguous message from Celeste instructing me to open an unofficial file on a university computer. Quill replied 12 minutes later. Do not use university devices or networks for further communication. Mimi Monday, 7 o'clock, East Archive Reading Room. Bring original devices. Tell no internal administrator. Her speed frightened us. At the meeting, she arrived wearing a gray coat and carrying no visible papers. She was in her late 50s, with close-cropped hair and the quiet attention of someone who had spent years being underestimated by louder people. She listened without interruption as each of us spoke. Dahlia admitted the financial relationship. Nico described coercion. Livia explained the staged allegation. Sarah outlined preservation methods. I described the malware file and the predicted ranking changes. Quill asked precise questions. Had any of us altered the messages?
No.
Had we accessed systems without permission?
No.
Had Celeste ever explicitly stated that she changed marks? Not in those words. Quill examined the visibility model, then removed her glasses. This is not a ranking tool, she said. It is a laundering mechanism. She explained that raw marks passed through several moderation stages. Legitimate adjustments could be made for examiner variance, assessment difficulty, or documented irregularities. Celeste and Vale were using those legitimate mechanisms to conceal targeted changes. Rather than directly typing a new score, they manipulated moderation categories, flagged certain performances for review, suppressed components as outliers, and applied discretionary scaling. Each step looked defensible alone. Together, they manufactured outcomes. Can you stop it? I asked. I can issue a preservation notice and request an external lock after final submissions. Will that expose them? Not necessarily. If I move now, they may claim the model is theoretical and abandon it. Dahlia's face hardened. Then we wait until they use it?
Quill looked at me.
Your records show you are currently first. They need your final assessment to justify the projected drop. What happens if you perform too well to discredit? I thought of Celeste's traps, the planted files, the mental health threat. She creates a reason to void my result. Exactly. Quill leaned forward. Your greatest risk is not losing points. It is being removed from the dataset before moderation. From that moment, the final assessment became more than an exam. It became a controlled corridor between traps. Quill arranged, through powers Celeste did not know she had exercised, for external duplication of all exam submissions, room footage, device logs, invigilator reports, and time-stamped scoring records. The request was disguised as a routine pilot audit. Only 2 external technicians knew its real purpose. I was not told their identities. You cannot act differently if you know too much, Quill said. Sit the assessment. Follow every rule. Touch nothing that is not yours. Accept no private instructions. Celeste, meanwhile, became warm again. 3 days before the exam, she met me in the corridor and squeezed my arm. I'm sorry we've been tense. I know pressure changes people. Her smile was flawless. I've arranged a quieter room for you because of your recent distress. There it was. Isolation. In my first life, I had been moved to a side room after Celeste claimed I was having panic symptoms. That room's camera failed. An invigilator later testified that I accessed unauthorized notes. This time I said, I haven't requested an adjustment. It's already approved. Please cancel it. Don't be stubborn. Students passed around us, glancing over. I raised my voice slightly, not enough to create a scene, only enough to create witnesses. I am formally declining any unrequested private room arrangement. I will sit in my assigned hall. Celeste's fingers tightened on my arm. You don't understand what I'm trying to protect you from. Then explain it by email.
She released me.
That afternoon, my portal changed my room assignment anyway. I sent a factual message to assessment services, copying the accessibility office. I did not request this accommodation and do not consent to a separate venue. Please confirm my standard hall allocation. The reply stated that the change had been requested by Student Wellbeing Liaison C. Ward due to an acute episode. I asked for the incident report. None existed. Within an hour, my original seat was restored. Celeste sent no message, but at midnight I received an anonymous email containing a photograph of Mara leaving her music school. The subject line read, "Focus on what matters." My whole body went numb. In my first life, Celeste never threatened my sister directly. Or perhaps she had and I had not understood. I called Mara immediately and told her to stay with our mother for the week. She complained, then heard my voice and stopped. Are you in danger? She asked. I wanted to say no. Instead I said, I'm making sure I'm not. Quill documented the email and referred it to law enforcement. The story had crossed another line. This was no longer about academic manipulation alone. Celeste was afraid enough to become careless. Exam morning arrived bright and windless. The kind of beautiful day that makes disaster feel impolite. I wore clothes without pockets, carried a transparent water bottle, and arrived 40 minutes early. Sarah waited outside the hall with Livia and Dahlia. We did not hug. We had agreed to avoid anything that looked coordinated. Nico passed me on the stairs and said, sensitivity is true positives over all actual positives. It was a joke about the planted formula card, so unexpected that I laughed. Pattern break. Fear loosened its grip for exactly 3 seconds. Then the doors opened. I entered the main hall beneath 6 cameras and found my assigned seat in the center row. On the desk lay a sealed answer booklet, 2 pencils, and a laminated candidate card. I checked the card. My name was correct. My student number was not. The final digit had been changed from 7 to 1. If I completed the exam under the wrong number, my paper could be misallocated or flagged. In my first life, I never checked. I raised my hand before touching anything. An invigilator approached. I pointed to the discrepancy. She compared it with her list and frowned. Your number here ends in 1. My official number ends in 7. Celeste appeared from the side aisle, as if summoned. She wore an invigilator badge despite not being listed on the published roster. It's a temporary anonymization code, she said. Proceed. I looked at the chief invigilator. Please document the discrepancy and verify through assessment services. Celeste's expression sharpened. You are delaying 200 students. From behind me, someone muttered, then verify it. Another student added, yeah, check hers. The room's mood shifted. Celeste relied on private pressure. Public procedure weakened her. The chief invigilator called assessment services. My real number ended in 7. The card was replaced, photographed, and logged. Celeste walked away, without looking at me. The exam began 12 minutes late. For the next 3 hours, I answered every case with a calm I did not feel. I noticed nothing unusual until the final 30 minutes, when an invigilator I did not recognize placed a folded tissue beside my elbow. You dropped this, he whispered. I had not. Through the thin paper, I saw blue ink. Notes. I kept both hands visible and said loudly, "That is not mine. Please remove it and record that you placed it here." Heads turned. The man froze. The chief invigilator hurried over. Celeste moved faster. "Ilara, don't make another scene." A note was placed on my desk. "You dropped it, then review the cameras." Silence. The unknown invigilator backed away. Quill's external duplication meant the footage could not disappear. Celeste knew that only if someone had warned her. Her face told me she had just realized the room was not under her control. The tissue contained condensed answers to 2 case sections. It should have triggered my immediate removal. Instead, because I reported it before touching it and demanded documentation, the chief invigilator isolated the item, recorded statements, and allowed me to continue under observation. The unknown man was identified as a temporary proctor named Elias Bren, contracted through a staffing agency connected to Meridian Academic Outreach. He claimed he saw the tissue fall from my sleeve. Camera footage showed him removing it from his own pocket. We did not learn this until later. At the time, all I knew was that Celeste stood near the exit, messaging rapidly. When the exam ended, she intercepted me in the foyer. "Come with me. We need to resolve this before it becomes formal." "No, you have been found with notes." A proctor planted them, her mouth curved into a sad smile. "That sounds delusional." The word was chosen carefully, linked to her earlier threats about my stability. Students streamed around us. Dahlia paused nearby, but did not intervene. Good. We needed Celeste to believe I was still alone. "Any discussion will happen with an advocate present," I said. "You don't have time for that. If you cooperate, I can protect your score." "From what?" "From the consequences of your choices." I took out my phone and opened the official email app, send the allegation in writing. She grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but visibly. Several students stopped. Then Professor Quill stepped through the doors. Celeste released me so abruptly my hand dropped.
Quill did not look at me.
She addressed the chief invigilator. "I am issuing an external preservation directive under Section 9 of the Assessment Integrity Code. Seal all materials, duplicate all logs, and suspend local deletion privileges." Celeste's face emptied. "On whose authority?"
Mean it.
"There is no basis." Quill turned to her. "There is now." That was the moment the trap reversed. Celeste had planned to remove me from the dataset. Instead, her attempt created the triggering event Quill needed to lock the entire assessment record. Every answer booklet, camera feed, score entry, moderation change, access log, and invigilator report became protected. No file could be altered without creating an audit trail. Celeste recovered quickly. "This is theatrical," she said. "A student was caught cheating." Quill replied, "Then the evidence will survive review." The entire foyer went quiet. Liars fear accusation, but they fear preservation more. For 2 days, nothing happened publicly. That silence nearly broke me. The exam was over, but the rankings process continued behind locked doors. Celeste remained on campus. Vale attended meetings. Rumors spread that I had been caught with notes and used connections to delay the results. Anonymous accounts posted that Dahlia and I were involved in a scholarship feud. Livia's accusation resurfaced online. Nico received an email stating his placement application required additional conduct review. The machinery kept moving because institutions do not transform the moment truth appears. They hesitate. They calculate. They protect themselves. I slept in Sarah's apartment because law enforcement advised me not to stay alone after the photograph of Mara. Every few hours, I woke convinced I was back on the bridge. Sarah would be at her desk, working under a lamp, and say, "Still 2026. Still alive. Still annoying." On the second night, Dahlia arrived carrying takeaway soup. She sat on the floor and admitted her father wanted her to withdraw her statement. "He says the university will destroy me to save itself." "Will you?" I asked. "I don't know." Honesty hurt more than reassurance. She rubbed her palms together. "My whole life, people have assumed money makes me fearless. It mostly gives me more things to lose." Nico, who had joined by video because he was working, said, They already decided I had nothing worth losing. The sentence silenced us. Then Livia opened her laptop and showed us a message from an unknown student. It contained a screenshot of Celeste offering post-assessment correction support for a cash transfer. Another student had saved messages. Our case was no longer 4 people. Word had spread quietly that evidence was being preserved. Students began contacting Quill's external office. Some had payment requests. Some had threats. Some had strange score changes stretching back 3 years. One former student had been told to accuse a classmate of cheating in exchange for a ranking increase. Another had paid Meridian for career placement consulting after Celeste warned her that her raw marks would not survive moderation. The pattern widened until concealment became impossible. At 3:16 a.m., Quill sent a single message: external lock confirmed. Preliminary audit shows unauthorized score modifications. Do not communicate with Celeste. I read it twice, then handed the phone to Sarah. She smiled faintly. Boring records. But the rankings were still not safe. The audit had found changes. It had not yet reversed them. Celeste and Vale could argue that adjustments were legitimate. We needed the messages to connect the model to the actual score edits. That was why saving them mattered. Not screenshots alone. The full chain. The disciplinary hearing began the morning before rankings were scheduled. It was not public, but by then half the campus seemed to be breathing through the walls. I sat across from a panel of 5. 2 external examiners, 1 legal officer, 1 student representative, and an acting dean from another faculty. Quill attended as investigator, not decision-maker. Celeste sat at the opposite table with a lawyer and Martin Vale. She wore navy this time.
No crime. No softness.
Vale looked offended rather than frightened, the expression of a man who believed procedure existed to protect him from consequences. Celeste's lawyer opened by arguing that the messages were taken out of context. The visibility model was a theoretical retention project, and the score adjustments reflected legitimate moderation. He described me as a high-achieving student under unusual psychological strain who developed an adversarial fixation on her tutor. There it was again. Instability. They submitted excerpts from my messages showing me asking Celeste for help, thanking her for guidance, and agreeing to keep conversations private. In my first life, those fragments destroyed me. This time, Sarah had preserved the full threads. When the lawyer displayed a screenshot where I wrote, "I trust you," Quill asked that the complete conversation be opened from the verified export. The preceding message from Celeste read, "If you refuse my recommendation, your score will be reviewed for anomalies." The following message read, "Delete this entire exchange." Context returned like oxygen. They displayed another fragment where I said, "I'll use the materials." The full thread showed I had written, "I'll use the materials already released on the official portal, not the private file." Again, the edit collapsed. Then came the malware attachment. Celeste denied knowing its contents. Sarah presented the original email headers, the file hash, the sandbox recording, and the generated documents. The device metadata pointed to CW Tutor 03. Vale claimed device names could be fabricated. Quill agreed. Then she introduced campus inventory records showing CW Tutor 03 was a university-issued laptop assigned exclusively to Celeste, and network logs recorded the file upload from that device during a period when Celeste's access card placed her in her office. Celeste's face remained still, but her left thumb began rubbing the edge of her folder. I remembered that habit. She did it when lying. The hearing centerpiece was not my testimony. It was the messages Celeste thought had vanished. Dahlia's voice notes established the donor bargain. Nico's messages established coercive targeting of financially vulnerable students. Livia's records tied Celeste to knowledge of a supposedly anonymous complaint. My archive connected the visibility model to the exact predicted ranking changes. The panel compared those predictions with the locked moderation log. My raw score was 94.6, first in the cohort. Celeste had flagged 3 components as statistically inconsistent with prior performance, even though my prior average was 93.8. Vale then suppressed those components and applied a discretionary penalty, reducing my moderated score to 77.2. The model had predicted 77.1. Dahlia's raw score was 91.4. Third, 2 borderline responses were upgraded after Tutor supported interpretive review, raising her to 95.0. The model predicted 95.0. Nico's raw score was 82.3. Attendance penalties were applied for sessions he had attended, dropping him to 64.8. The model predicted 64.9. Livia's score included a conduct deduction based on the staged formula card allegation, despite the investigation remaining unresolved. Row by row, the theoretical model matched the real manipulation within tenths of a point. Vale began blaming Celeste. Celeste began blaming Vale. Their alliance lasted exactly as long as silence did. Then the lawyer asked to exclude the messages because students had violated Celeste's expectation of privacy. The legal officer replied that recipients are generally entitled to retain communications sent to them, subject to applicable law, and that the university's own policy required preservation of evidence related to suspected misconduct. Celeste turned to me for the first time since the hearing began.
You planned this, she said.
Her lawyer touched her arm, but she continued. You pretended to trust me. You baited conversations. You watched me. The room shifted. She wanted to make my preparations sound sinister. I answered carefully. I saved what you sent me. You manipulated me into explaining things. I asked whether the materials were official. You knew what I meant. Yes, I said. That's why I saved it. Her composure cracked. Without me, none of you would have placements. None of you understand what rankings require. Raw performance is chaos. Donors want confidence. Hospitals want polished candidates. The university wants success stories. I created order. The panel chair asked, by falsifying results? Celeste looked around the room as if searching for someone brave enough to admit they needed her. No one did. By ensuring the right people rose, she said. That sentence erased her defense. Not immediately, not theatrically, but completely. The panel recessed for 90 minutes. Outside, I sat on a bench with my hands locked together. Dahlia paced. Nico had fallen asleep upright after working overnight. Livia kept checking the time. Sarah ate crackers one at a time, methodically, as though hearings were weather. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, grief arrived. I thought about my first life, Mara's violin sold, my mother's unanswered calls, my own face under the word cheater, the bridge. I had spent 6 weeks moving so quickly that memory could not catch me. Now it sat beside me. Dahlia stopped pacing. What happens if they still protect her? Then we release everything to the regulator, Sarah said. And the press, Livia added. Quill had already secured an external referral.
Concealment was expensive now.
When the panel returned, the chair read the interim findings. Celeste and Vale were suspended pending termination proceedings and referred for potential fraud, coercion, evidence tampering, and unauthorized access offenses. Meridian Academic Outreach's financial records would be audited. Every ranking from the previous 4 years influenced by their moderation decisions would undergo review. All current cohort results would be recalculated from locked raw scores by an external team. No conduct penalty would be applied to Livia. Nico's attendance record would be corrected. Dahlia's score would be restored to its unadjusted mark. Her family's donations would be investigated separately. My cheating allegation was dismissed based on video evidence showing the proctor planting the notes. The proctor had already admitted he was paid through Meridian and instructed to create grounds for voiding my exam. Celeste closed her eyes. Vale whispered something to his lawyer. I heard only the final decision. Publication of rankings delayed 24 hours to permit verified recalculation. 24 hours. In my first life, my future had been destroyed before lunch. In this one, truth needed one more day. That evening, Celeste found me anyway. The university had ordered her to surrender access and leave campus, but as I crossed the old botanical courtyard, she stepped from behind the greenhouse. For 1 second, fear returned so violently, I tasted metal. She looked smaller without her staff badge. Not harmless, just stripped of scenery. You ruined hundreds of careers, she said. I saved their real scores. You think raw marks are fair? She laughed. Some students have tutors, money, quiet homes, no jobs. Others arrive exhausted and terrified. The system is already unequal. I merely chose which inequalities mattered. It was the closest she had come to honesty. You chose the ones that paid you.
I chose stability.
You marked people as expendable. Everyone does. Institutions just use gentler words. I wanted to tell her about the bridge. I wanted to describe the sound of the horn, the cold certainty that no one would ever believe me. But that truth belonged to a life she no longer controlled. So I asked, why me? Her expression sharpened with something like disappointment. Because you were perfect. Poor enough to be grateful. Brilliant enough to advertise. Isolated enough to manage. I planned to lift you for 2 years. Until Dahlia's father paid more? Until you became difficult. The simplicity of it hurt. I had spent my first life searching for the flaw in myself that justified her betrayal. There was none. I was a line item whose value changed. Celeste stepped closer. Withdraw your testimony. Say Sarah pressured you. Say Quill coached you. I can still make this survivable. Even now, she offered protection from the danger she created. I took out my phone. Her eyes dropped to it. Are you recording me? No, I held up the screen. The emergency call with campus security was already connected. I learned to keep official channels open. 2 officers entered the courtyard from opposite sides. Celeste's face changed, not into panic, but contempt. You think winning a ranking makes you safe? She said as they approached.
No, irraplia.
Saving the messages did. At 8:59 the next morning, my name appeared first on the main screen. The crowd erupted before the clock changed. Students shouted, cried, refreshed the rankings on their phones, and tried to understand the corrected numbers. Dahlia stood third, exactly where her raw score placed her. She looked at the screen for a long time, then exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for years. Nico ranked 46th and qualified for his placement. When he saw it, he did not cheer. He called his mother and covered his face. Livia ranked 32nd. She punched my shoulder hard enough to hurt and said, "Never make me learn this much about metadata again." Then, at 9, the screen went white. Gasps rippled through the hall. My body remembered another life. For one terrible heartbeat, I thought Celeste had found a final switch. Then the dean stepped onto the landing and explained that publication had been paused for 5 minutes to add a notice. Rankings were provisional pending the 4-year audit, and students affected by historical manipulation would be contacted. The screen returned. My name remained first. That was when Celeste, standing under escort near the administration doors, looked at me across the crowd. She had been brought in to surrender devices under warrant. Her eyes found mine, and for the first time, she had no private message to send, no whispered threat, no altered screenshot, no room where cameras failed. Only distance and witnesses. The crowd did not know the full story yet. They only knew the rankings had been recalculated after serious irregularities. But Celeste knew why her model had failed. She had taught me to delete uncertainty, to erase conversations, to trust her memory over my own. Reborn, I did the opposite. I saved every word. And before the rankings came out, her fake results were erased instead.